Here at SpecialEffect, people often ask us for help with playing FIFA. FIFA 19 has a range of features that can help make the game a bit more accessible, so we're going to have a look at these on PS4 and Xbox One. On PS4 and Xbox One, the range of accessibility features are pretty much identical. These settings will also appear on Nintendo Switch with one key difference, which we'll have a look at a bit later on, and also on PC if you're using a controller. So a really good place to start with FIFA is to go to the practice arena, especially if you haven't played it before. In here really you can just kind of practice with the controls and just get used to playing the game and taking shots on goal. There's no time pressure, you can just take as many shots as you like. So something that can be helpful in FIFA is that you can customise your own controls, so you can swap buttons around. So for example, if hitting R2 for sprint was difficult, but you can press L2, then you could swap them over. So if we just have a quick look at how you can do that. So you just go across to the Customise menu, and then it's into Settings. And from here you can customise your controls. So in this section here, if I make L2 become R2, so now L2 would be my sprint if that was easier for me. Then you just need to go back and you can just save. So as well as being able to customise your own controls, there are a couple of other control schemes on FIFA 19 that could be really helpful. So the first one to look at is 2-button mode. So that's these controls here. So if using the whole controller is difficult, then there's a way that you can play FIFA using left stick, X and circle, or A and B if you're on Xbox. The game also does give you the option to sprint, but if accessing R2 for sprint is difficult, that's okay because the game does have a really good auto sprint built in as well. So the game does want you to be able to press options at the beginning of a match to be able to get the match started, but once the match begins, you shouldn't need to use that again unless you wish to pause the game. I'm using a PlayStation controller. Left stick will be player movement, X for pass and circle for shoot, but if you're on an Xbox, the only difference would be A is pass and B is shoot. First of all, I'll show you using the right trigger or R2 for sprinting, but then we'll have a look at auto sprinting as well. Your pass button will do a ground pass. If you hold the pass button down, then you can do a lob. When you don't have the ball, then your pass button becomes a light tackle and your shoot button becomes a sliding tackle. So if I hold down the R2 or right trigger button now, I can sprint. Auto sprinting is on automatically, it's always on. It just depends whether you press R2 or not. So you can see here I'm not holding down the trigger, but the player was sprinting, so the game kind of knows when you should sprint and it will control it for you. So if accessing one joystick and 2 buttons is difficult, there is another way that you can play, which is 1-button mode. This needs one joystick for player movement and 1 button, which is basically your action button. So it'll either be pass during most parts of the game, but if you get towards the goal, then the button turns into the shoot button. So if we have a quick look at that now. So this is the 2-button mode, and we're just going to move across to 1 button there. So again, this mode also has auto sprinting. You don't have the option to sprint. The game will always be an auto sprint. So now my pass button has become the action button. So I can use that for passing. And then when I pressed action button, when I was towards the goal, it took a shot. So there are some settings in the game that we can have a look at that can help make the game a bit more accessible, such as changing the difficulty, and there's also sliders. So this is for when you're playing offline and when you're playing against the computer. So just in the settings, we'll go across to game settings. So just for example, the difficulty setting here was on beginner, but you can move it from beginner, amateur, semi-pro, and it goes all the way through to just various different settings there. So if you haven't played before or you haven't played for a while, it can be quite good to start with beginner and then work your way up. Another thing you can do is change the speed of the game. So if you find that the game is running quite quickly, you can actually change the speed to make it slower. You can change all these different sliders which relate to your player. So for example, you could make it so that your team will sprint faster, maybe shoot faster, that kind of thing, which can give you a bit of an advantage when you're playing against the computer. Another thing you can do is slow the computer down, make them less accurate with their shots, that kind of thing. And that can be really helpful, especially when you've just started playing. So there are a couple of other settings that can be helpful. We can just pause the game and go down to settings, and then it's just in Customise Controls. One of the settings is timed finishing. This basically requires you to press the shoot button twice within a short space of time. Basically it gives the shot more power and more accuracy if you time it right. If doing that is difficult, or if it's going to make the game harder for you to play, you can just switch that off. If you're playing in either 1 or 2 button modes, then you'll find that it's switched off automatically and you're not actually able to turn it back on. So that's just good to know. If you go down to auto switching, this is where you'd switch the control of depending on which player you want to control when you don't have the ball. So when you're defending, you can basically press a button to switch to different players. But by putting it onto automatic, it means that the game will automatically always make you control the defender that's nearest the ball. So you can navigate a lot of FIFA's menus with the left stick, but there are parts that want you to use the right stick and also to use either bumpers or triggers. So we're just going to have a quick look now at how you can use the accessibility settings to make everything work just on the left stick and X and circle, or A and B if you're on Xbox. So if we just go across to Customize, and then down to Settings, and there's the accessibility settings here. So we're just going to map everything onto left stick. So now I won't need to use the right stick at all in the menus. And the same for L1, R1, L2 and R2, or the alternative buttons on the Xbox. So an area where the game expects you to use the right stick to navigate the menu, I can now just use the left stick. So on the skill game section on the screen, for example, you can see those 4 small circles. So if I move over to the skill games, it now lets me use just the left stick. And if I press right on the left stick now, I can move between the various options. And once you want to leave this area of the menu, you just have to move the stick back across again in the direction that you want it to go. The Nintendo Switch has almost all the same accessibility settings as the PS4 and the Xbox One. The only thing it doesn't have is the menu accessibility. So you're not able to map everything onto the left stick, but you are able to play the game in 1 and 2 button mode and everything else that we've discussed. Throughout this video, we have used standard console controllers, but if using these is difficult, then there might be other ways that you can play. We've got other videos on our YouTube channel, so please do have a look to see if there's other options that would work for you. Thank you for watching this video, and if there's anything that we can do to help, then please do get in touch.